Green Rush, Mining the Energy Revolution with Matt Watson.
Hello and welcome to Green Rush, Mining the Energy Revolution. I'm your host, Matt Watson. Each week we take a look at the periodic table and we dive into yet more elements about these critical minerals and the ecosystem surrounding them. This week we're going to talk about precious metals recycle. Our special guest is Mr. Oliver Krestin, the managing director at Hensel Recycling, based in Germany. Oliver, how you doing?
I'm very well. Thanks, Matt, for having me.
No, thank you for joining. So why don't we start off? Let's talk a little bit about Hensel. I'll give you a chance to talk about your company and what you guys do. I just grabbed a couple of screenshots from your website to give people a sense of the sorts of materials that you guys process in your recycling operations. Why don't you take it from there, Oliver?
Yeah, so Hensel Recycling is a family-owned business headquartered in Aschaffenburg, Germany. That's about 30 miles south of Frankfurt Airport,
Right.
so right in the center. We're in business since 26 years now and started as a small catalyst collecting company. And over the years, we really developed us to a global player with subsidiaries in Korea, in Malaysia, in Australia, Austria, France, England, and the East and the West Coast in the United States. We're employing around 250 people. Yeah, and from catalyst, we went to other materials like electronic scrap, heavy-duty diesel converters, stationary emission catalyst, oxygen sensors, and nowadays we look also into fuel cells and spark plugs.
Oh, fantastic. All right. So yeah, I had a map of your operations. Your most recent announcement is you had acquired what was previously Red Fox Resources based in Oakland, California, with my friend Brad Edgar out there. So you've got Brad now under the Hensel umbrella, it sounds like.
Yeah, but it's still Red Fox Resources. So the brand name is still there. And we appreciate it. And Brad and his team are very knowledgeable in the heavy duty sector and is a good fit in our portfolio.
Right. Yeah, I was going to say, Brad, this Red Fox Resources was very much focused on the heavy duty side. There's some collectors that focus largely on the light duty. So you're very much well entrenched now in both heavy duty and light duty. Explain a little bit. You have a new operation, this Hensel North America. What's going on with this new operation here, Oliver?
That's not new. So that's already there since 2010. So for 12 years in New Jersey, in a lovely town called West Berlin. Pretty good for a German company to be in West Berlin, New Jersey. We do. We started also with auto catalyst, mainly the foil catalyst, like a niche business, and there's about 30 employees there, and covering North and South America for the normal catalytic converter passenger cars and also heavy duty. So we have an East Coast and a West Coast location now with Red Fox in Oakland.
I want to ask you a question. I should have got this approval in advance. I haven't, but I was trying to get a sense of your smelting capacity. I know you have at least one smelter at about 2,000 tons a year. Is that roughly your capacity, about 2,000 tons a year?
No, so we had a smelter.
Right.
We don't have it anymore.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, no problem. No, we went through that and really running a plasma smelter in Europe with a material mix, and I think we talk about that maybe later. It's not that easy. So we're running it from 2014 to 17, and now we have smelters and refiners as our partners, and this gives us a much greater volumes capacity, using existing capacity in the market.
So let's get into a little bit about this catalytic converter market, and of course, people in the industry, we call it AutoCats, abbreviated, but auto catalyst, it is a huge multi-billion-dollar market. I would gauge your overall global market share. You got to be at least 3 to 5%, if not higher, in the global market. So you're a significant player in this front. I was looking at your website. I'm really impressed.
Yeah.
Like most collectors, there's lots of detail on every single part number of every catalytic converter out there. It's a digital world these days. Everybody knows all the different varieties and part numbers of catalytic converters and have a sense of what the content are of the PGMs that are in that catalytic converter. Is that right?
Yeah, and we what you see there, it's really the old catalog, yeah, a printed version, which we,
Right.
I think 2006, so maybe 18 years ago, we started that in Europe to give it to our scrapyard that they can identify. And because normally people were grading catalysts not by part number, they were grading it by a small, large, medium, and then was
Right.
always the discussion: what is a small, what is a large, and what is a medium. So we put it in that book and said, okay, here is what you can see, and then it clear definition what we think it's a extra large or a large catalyst.
Right.
But yeah, and then we went into digital world, and now everybody has an app. But I think in Europe we spent 18, 20, maybe 20 years in collecting data, and I would say 10,000 of data and analysts assay results that we have and part numbers.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And again, I grabbed a screenshot of your toll refining process flow. Kind of walk us through, if you're a catalytic converter collector, a scrapyard, and you approach Hensel with a couple Gaylords worth of catalytic converters. Explain the process of how you transact the recovery of these catalytic converters.
Yeah, it's really depending on the customer. We have the classic purchase business where somebody has, let's say, 100 converters and he wants to sell it on the spot. So you have to go there, you look at the part numbers, you grade them, to check that it's no fakes in there. That's just recently we had to come again across with fake catalyst. I thought this was over, but as the volumes go down, maybe they're coming back. Yeah, and then
Right.
we pay or wire the money as per the grading. The other one is we call it quick payment. That's more assay based, but it's also for smaller volumes. So we can cut, sample, mill it, and do an assay within a couple of days. Yeah, and then make a payment based on the assay. And then the typical toll refining, that's for the larger customers and also car manufacturers, the OEMs. They really send us large volumes. We process them, sample it, take an assay, and then either return the metals to a pool account that it can be used for new catalyst production, or they can sell the metals from their pool account whenever they like the price, take out a little bit of volatility. We also offer the option to hedge even prior to delivery. So in volatile markets, that supports a lot so that people can manage the metal prices.
So on the slide I have up, this is my model, my outlook for how much of the PGMs, and when you're talking PGMs, you're talking palladium, platinum, and rhodium. In a light-duty vehicle, they'll have all three at some ratio. Gasoline vehicles are very much a palladium-centric catalyst. When you get into diesel, both heavy-duty and even light-duty diesel, it'll be more of a platinum-centric catalyst. With rhodium in to help deal with NOx on the light duty in particular. And I show a picture here over time of how much PGMs measured in thousands of troy ounces have gone into the automotive catalytic converter space. And it's shocking, right? We, passing through 6 million, we're up over 12 million, approaching 13 million troy ounces a year into the catalytic converters themselves. So just a huge volume of PGMs. And people often ask me, how much metal is on the road today? You've got some population of vehicles on the road. And so I mapped out some statistics. So 2 decades ago in 2004, there was a little under 600 million vehicles on the road, or 0.6 billion vehicles, if you will, containing about 35 million ounces of platinum, 43 million ounces of palladium, and some 8 million troy ounces of rhodium. Here now in present day, those numbers have grown substantially. Now you've got 131 million troy ounces of palladium out on the road today. And by 2044, and this is accounting for what I think the EV penetration rate is going to look like, it's going to grow even further out to 175 million troy ounces of palladium, another 55 million of platinum, and 22 of rhodium. On a vehicle count that's growing from 0.6 to 1.4 billion, up to what I project is a little under 1.8 billion ICE vehicles on the road. So to give people a sense of, what I characterize as the world's largest precious metals pool account, all of our vehicles on the road, right? So it's a huge population and a huge opportunity for recovery. And I think it's just fascinating that this industry is so well evolved and set up that we're harvesting this weight. It's going to come back into the system. So I wanted to give our listeners a bit of a sense of how that works. The next conversation in this is there's a lag. So yeah, those are when the vehicles were built. This is the weight that was going into these vehicles and the model years that they were built. But how long are cars lasting? And I talk about ice ages are shifting. Well, ice ages of vehicles on the road is growing over time dramatically. Top left here is a chart. This is a USA data. This is from our Department of Motor Vehicles. They're able to extract and they're able to get the average age of these ICE vehicles of cars and trucks on the road today. And they've done these samplings of data sets over broad swaths of time. And you can see the trends here when you break it down by vehicle type, what the average age on the road is. And you see that pickups and trucks, you're sitting here pushing over, nearly 18 years of age nominal average, with kind of the tail end of life being well beyond that, over 20 years of age of when these vehicles finally come to be cashed in, if you will, and you can collect that metal. I love to tell people in my presentations that, hey, the growth of global light duty trucks, which are popular not only in the US, but also in Asia and across the globe, the growth of trucks, one of these kind of higher lifetime populations of SUVs and trucks are lasting forever. And so having vehicles drop off at 20 to 25 years of age at end of life is not unusual. That's the norm. And so when you think about the data set I was just showing you, you're always harvesting from a previous distribution years ago. And so today, we're harvesting probably here in the middle. 20 years ago, we were harvesting from an earlier population. So the point being is, in 20 years from now, you're going to be harvesting even more metal than we're harvesting today. This is an industry that's going to continue to grow. And it looks like this vehicle age phenomenon is going to continue as well, that ice ages are getting longer and longer. So Oliver, I'll pause there. Any comments or things you want to add to that characterization?
Yeah, so maybe to your slide before. So I think you mixed up a little bit. So gasoline cars are palladium, rhodium, and
Yes.
diesel cars are platinum mainly and a little bit of palladium.
Did I get? I got dyslexic and got them.
You said on the light duty diesel. Yeah. So really, what we see is, especially in the US, where the diesel share is, what is it, below 2%, 3% on the total car park. Yeah. So it's a much more palladium, rhodium driven market. And
right.
Yeah, of course. And you see nicely in that dips in your forecast there. I can't read the numbers, pretty small, but when it's growing to 8 million ounces, and then it's that dip. What year is it? Is it 2009?
Yeah, that's the COVID year, 2019.
2009. There's also a dip, or the first one.
Oh yes, yeah. That was the.
So I think that's global financial crisis, and then the next dip is probably COVID.
Yep.
Or I don't know where we are now, and then you get the chip crisis, and that's whenever demand goes down, car production goes down, and then to the next slide, car age, and if you look where we now, and you look back 15 years average lifetime of a car, we're in the middle of the financial crisis. So that's why there is no catalyst, because there were no cars being sold. Yeah, plus the cars lasting longer, plus we have inflation. Nobody was buying a new car. So in that graphs, you can easily say what's happening at the moment. Yeah, and looking forward, you can see the next dip coming in 15 to 20 years.
That's exactly right. The only other commentary I think that's worthy of discussion is, you can see in terms of loadings, it's largely the increase in loadings has been palladium. That the designers of these catalysts, palladium, adding additional palladium over time, has been key to meeting the tighter and tighter emission standards that evolve year over year from different regions on the globe. So, so the designers, to meet the emission specs that are forever getting tighter, have used palladium as been the key agent to get you to achieve those tighter.
And it was much cheaper than platinum when they started that, and now they reversed it.
That's right. No, and I just want people to get a sense of how this recycle system works. And so let's get into a little bit about the three different metals and the recovery. So Here's a little bit more complicated chart. I've shown this in previous episodes, but we've got some loadings that are going into brand new vehicles. So this is kind of your new vehicle demands, and the recovery rates. You don't get all of it back, even with the time lag. One thing that I think those of us close to this industry realize, part of the precious metals in your catalytic converter dissipates over time. It exits the catalytic converter. It actually leaves. Lots of discussion is at roadside. They've actually done samplings of roadside sweeps where they collect materials like on an LA, road, and they look at the parts per million of PGMs. It's actually rather significant. So there's evidence of it on the roadside, but not all the metal can be captured. You're only getting roughly half the metal back at the end of the day. Is that about right, Oliver?
Yeah, we don't exactly know, because we never know how much catalyst was on the original cat. We always get mixed loads, and even if we have a single individual catalyst, so we never know exactly how big the loading was and how many miles it was driven. So how much did it really lose? But everybody believes that there are losses, and also during catalyst handling, when it's get cut out
Yes.
on a scrap yard and it gets thrown in a bin, then maybe you lose stuff. So we always say, keep your catalyst carefully, handle it, because it's the wash code that is on the substrate. You can lose it if you don't handle it correctly. And of course, there's catalysts that maybe will not remove from the car when they are too close to the engine, and it's a small catalyst that maybe people don't take it out because it has a small volume, but it's a small value. But there's maybe millions of these little catalysts out there that maybe not get recovered. That also counts. Yeah. And of course, there's old timers on the street that will never get scrapped.
Right. So for over the past decade, about 85% of the palladium that's been produced and mined goes into catalytic converters. It's the dominant demand source, if you will, for palladium. It's absolutely essential to the palladium market. And as you look at these long-term projections on how much we're going to harvest from these vehicles, from this massive pool account that's on the road and all these vehicles on the road today, we're going to harvest more and more palladium. And I put it now in the context, what's the mining outlook look like? And I show it by region. South Africa is going to decline. Russia is responsible for about 40% of the mining. North America, Zimbabwe. And then the recycle piece, which of course becomes part of our supply picture, is going to grow over time. And so this is kind of the foundation of the concern for palladium as the one of the key elements on the periodic table that's actually been suffering on price. It's going to be in an oversupply state, is the perception long term. What are we going to do with all this material, especially all this recycle, is a big question mark for the PGMs, the basket as a whole. What's going to happen with that basket? And I have projections. You're going to have at least 10 years, if not 13 to 15 years, of palladium above ground without new demand sources for palladium being discovered and pushed into operation. And so I encourage any R&D type, any organization, when you're looking at metals, if palladium has a fundamental application for you, I would drive toward using it, because I think you're going to see slack in the palladium market year over year as we go forward, as the surplus situation builds up over time. And it's one we see coming, and it's one we got to come up with an answer for. So I'm going to have sessions focused on this in the future. One of the projects that's looking at taking up this excess slack of palladium is what's called the Lion Battery Project on next generation batteries. We'll have a session on that for listeners that they can listen to. But that's one of the bigger hopes of what can take up some of the slack. Meanwhile, the other two elements, platinum and rhodium, same sort of situation. The platinum, demand that's gone into new vehicles. And I want to emphasize, like you said, about 60 to 70% of the platinum will go into diesel applications, whether it be heavy duty or light duty. So most of the platinum's hiding in diesel applications. And then the rhodium is mostly in light duty gasoline. But the same sort of pictures where, we've got, I think, a projection for decades and decades of returns yet to come back from these metals. Platinum is going to be highly sought after for the hydrogen economy. Rhodium has a whole litany of different potential uses. I'm a little less worried about rhodium than I am palladium. I think rhodium's role in NOx reduction in particular is profound. Any comments here, Oliver, from the last couple?
No, I think it's. We had one of the meetings during the IPMI where I think we said recyclers kills themselves. As you said, we're harvesting so much palladium in the years to come, and this will have an impact on the price. So even if the market is growing, I think the margins will go significantly down because the value of the catalyst will decrease. And so let's see what happens to the mines. But yeah, there's so much palladium coming out, and if you think about China, so all the palladium that goes in China for catalyst stays in China. I think in a couple of years China will be self-sufficient, that they recycle their auto catalyst and they don't need any imports. Especially with their big electric vehicle fleet.
Right. And so you
And
kind of
yeah,
hinted at this
for
earlier.
platinum,
So
I'm a little bit more. Sorry, I said now for platinum, I'm a
please.
little bit more positive, as you said. So it's basically coming from the diesel cars, and I think platinum is only 60% auto catalyst share. There's much more other applications, and as you mentioned, hydrogen economy. Hopefully, all these PEM fuel cells will use platinum. Rhodium, I'm not sure. Yeah, it has a little bit longer lifetime maybe than palladium, but there is also so much rhodium coming from catalyst recycling in the years. So you need a lot of applications to make up this mass market that auto catalyst was. And I think rhodium is 90% goes into auto catalyst right now. Yeah.
Right. And to give people a perception of, a feel for the platinum's going into the hydrogen economy today. The scale on this chart is in thousands of troy ounces. There's somewhere between 600 to 700,000 troy ounces a year that today go into the hydrogen economy, and that's going to grow year over year. So I think there's, my fear as an analyst is that there's not going to be enough platinum. So I'm very much not worried about the platinum picture. I think this is going to take care of itself with a home in the hydrogen economy. So I'm not
And
worried
especially
about
the supply side, though the mines in South Africa, there's no big investment going on. The mines are depleting, so supply side will go down. Recycling maybe kicks up a little bit, but demand is still there, so that should help.
That's great. So you alluded to this. So recyclers like yourself, like Hensel, they've been trying to figure out, hey, our volumes are down and down roughly, I'd say, about the past year and a half, 2 years now. We've seen a kind of a blip in the radar on how much volumes are coming in, and trying to come to grips with why are these volumes down. And as we went through on those earlier slides, the ice age, the vehicle age, people are hanging on to their gasoline vehicles longer than ever. Prices of cars are so old, so high. Interest rates are so high. There's a real reluctance on new buying, and so it's part of this is people hanging onto their vehicles and the ice age just getting older and older. I think there's a reluctance to scrap those old vehicles because of all that. I know I've had just recently 2 vehicles with over 250,000 miles on them. So what? It's cheaper than buying new. There's been issues. We could talk about, auto catalyst theft. Of course, that's been a big topic in both Europe and especially in the U.S. And I think the federal government and the feds have done a great job of cracking down on some of the bigger crime networks that were going on. There's groups like DG Auto and Elevation Auto. So I think the FBI is effectively taking a lot of that theft rate down. And as the prices have come down, there's some concern that the theft rate can be playing a role into why this is slowing down. And then, but most importantly, is the PGM prices of palladium and rhodium have dropped in the past couple of years, and so the value in these catalytic converters has dropped as a result of that. And those are kind of 4 key points I could think of as to why the market is slowing down. And then you mentioned another one, Oliver. You talked about the economic recession in 08, 09. That 8th range. That's right. What we're on top of is yet maybe a 5th major category of why the volumes are going down. Anything else you could think of as to why it's slowing down?
No, I think these are the 5 points, and just let me comment on something. So the ice age, nice word, ice age. It's not only because people hanging longer to the car. I think the cars are much more durable. They're holding longer, and because of COVID, there's less mileage. People are staying more at home, working from home, so they last longer. yeah, and then with interest rates so high, inflation, costs of living, everything, people really maybe can't afford to buy a new car. So we heard that the repair shops in Europe are pretty busy to fixing old cars to keep them. But also there will be a turning point, when it's not longer makes sense to repair an old car, then it comes to a point where it can shift. Catalytic converter theft. I don't think that we're getting less catalytic converters because the FBI is after all that crooks that are in the market. Because I think it's more that there is, especially in the United States, a lot of legislations. Every state, county, city has their own legislation on who can deal with catalytic converters, and that's maybe some major collectors are holding back and saying, "Hey, I don't want to apply for a license in that remote part of my state to go there and collect catalyst." That could be that it's just more the bureaucracy at the moment that it slows down, and that everybody needs the proper license and go through all the regulation to comply with the law. In general, catalytic converter theft was a big issue, but with the lower metal prices, and that's the fourth point, it's less of interest. It's when you want to steal a Toyota Prius at $1,500 per unit, or now maybe only $300 per unit, makes a big difference. The risk that you take as a thief. So hopefully that's over. And yeah, depressed PGM prices. Unfortunately, a lot of scrap guys should watch your videos and see what the prediction is. They all think, oh yeah, now the palladium price is down. I wait a year and then it's coming back to $3,000 an ounce. I believe this will never happen again. But that there's just a point then. How long will they hold on? How long can they look at the metal price? And maybe there's a point where they just say, now I have to sell. But it's more like a wave. It's not that, when everybody who's sitting on converters sends it out, I think in a month it's gone, and then we're back to the low levels. I think that's not the main thing. I think main important thing is there must be cars going to scrap yards. That's where the bottleneck is, in my point. That's the biggest, and that's a different reason. That's maybe point 1, 2, and 5. Yeah, that's the key drivers.
Understood. Great. Well, let's shift. Let's look forward now. We keep talking about this hydrogen economy. There's a PGM weight, if you will, and in what's called an electrolyzer that generates hydrogen. These could be a number of different technologies I'll get into in a minute, or it could be in the transportation fuel cells, whether it be trucks or vehicles, forklifts that have a fuel cell on board that convert a hydrogen tank into power to drive your vehicle. So this is an economy that's coming our way. It's a bit early. There's not a lot of recycle weight in the system yet, if you will. It's going to take another 5 years, I think, before we'll start seeing more and more significant weight show up. On the electrolyzers, on the producing of the hydrogen, there's a whole slate of technologies that are out there. This is a little bit oversimplified, but there's the lion's share of what's out in the field is what's called an alkaline electrolyzer. There's proton exchange membranes, which use a large amount of PGMs. There's a variety called solid oxide fuel cells, a lot like companies like Bloom Energy. These are rare earth oxide-based technologies and driven technologies. And then emerging, we're going to hear more and more about direct methanol fuel cells that can use platinum and palladium and even ruthenium in the mix. And so there's a slate of technologies involved. I know most analysts were focused on the PEM, but there's actually a significant amount of PGMs that are going into alkaline systems. And this is an increasing trend over time. So even some of our alkaline systems, we're seeing platinum and some of the minor PGMs, iridium and ruthenium and mixed metal oxides, working their way into that field. So this is a target population. I know that, Hensel, you're looking at chasing and collecting, and I was hoping you can give our listeners a bit of a view with European, I'll call it Green New Deal money. There's been funding that's occurred over the past couple of years, and there was a group called this Best 4HY. Why don't you talk us a little bit through that project and Hensel's role in this, and what you've garnered from that project learning?
Yeah, so Best for High, so Best for Hydrogen, was funded by the European Union and was a consortium of companies like us as a recycler, but we had universities, institutes, fuel cell manufacturers, and we looked at all the aspects. If you can bring back up this slide, please.
Yeah.
I can talk you through it a little bit. So our focus basically was in finding ways of new ways to recycle critical raw materials out of fuel cells, and it's starting with dismantling a stack. Obviously,
Right.
there might be ways to dismantle a stack in the future, but right now, where you have, it's not a mass production. You work on prototypes. You have small series. So we found out that really the best way is really a manual dismantling.
Right.
We tested it as we do it with e-scrap in the beginning. Really put it all through a shredder. Can we take it out? But the nanoparticles from the catalysts that are on the membrane, you bring them in every fraction. They go with all the other metals. So it's really key that you do a very proper, carefully dismantling to recover the MEAs, and from there, then we take the next step. So it really, the dismantling, we came up and saying, yeah, if you get 10,000 stacks, all of the same make and model, then you can use a robot, for example, and you could do. But for the next 5 to 10 years, I think manual dismantling carefully is a way to go, as long as it's
Right.
not a mass production. Then it's a different story. But it doesn't make sense now to invest in a big robot and then they change the design every new generation. And and then was really, can you recover from the catalyst or from the membrane the platinum, and make it really in a closed loop. So recover the platinum from the fuel cell, make it into a salt, make it into a new catalyst, coat a new membrane, and reuse it in a fuel cell. And with that, it was also what happens to the membrane, the ionomer, which is made of PFAS, so not an easy product. And we came also up with a solution how you can recover the polymer, the ionomer,
Right.
and to reuse it. But at least we could recover it. We didn't test it now already, well, in the project. We're now a step further,
Right.
but in Best for High, we recovered and separated the ionomer from the platinum. We produced the platinum salt and we made tests, and it showed that it will work, without further. Of course, it needs further refining, but in general, it shows that it can be a closed loop process. Yeah.
Right. I think one of the key points I want to get across to our listeners as well is the recovery rate, which you have mentioned here. I mean, achieving 95% yields and recovery on the platinum in particular is going to be very doable. These are systems where the metal is not escaping. It's not like catalytic converters where there's some chance of dissipation. I think the rate of capture and recycle yield is going to be much higher in these. Would you agree?
Yeah. And I think we have typically, when you have a material and it goes, even if it goes to a smelting refinery, you get 98 plus typically. So and in a lab scale, I think we went even higher. But we have to prove if it's a commercial plant. But I think 95 is pretty low end, so you can go much higher.
Yeah. Getting 97, 98% recovery, I think, is what we should be projecting in our model. So that's good news. The sustainability aspects of the hydrogen economy should be much higher. Now, there's going to be issues with some of the iridium oxides and ruthenium oxides, potentially in some of the electrolyzers. That's another refining topic on its own. Those yields might be.
Will be hopefully a new project for us. So there's something in the European Union that they look on electrolyzers. I think similar things is going on in the US funded project.
Right. Right.
Yeah, iridium, ruthenium might be a little bit more difficult, but if you go the same way and you can separate and get rid of the ionomer and the fluoride in it, that is the normal incineration way, which is not nice for that, especially from a sustainability point. So if you go wet chemically on it and you can separate the iridium and the ruthenium and bring it in a high concentrate to a refinery, I think you get also good yields. Maybe not as high as platinum, but.
Great. I appreciate it. So that just gives people a sense of what's coming our way. And then finally, let's wrap up. The other segment of your business is e-waste. People have this vision of e-waste being this glorious process. And, just to throw some statistics on what's going on in the semiconductor industry, here's a plot of the historical. This is the total revenue in billions of dollars. We're sitting here last year at some 534. We're going to hopefully be closer to 600 billion this year from the semiconductor market. But with the AI explosion, there's views that this is going to quickly get to $1 trillion market in short order. So I mentioned the trajectory of semiconductor growth just as a reference, with AI driving what is going to be a faster CAGR here. My calculations, when I model all the metals going into semiconductor, I think about 1.6% of this statistic, this revenue number, is precious metals related, just to give people a sense how much, what's the content rate in semiconductor. And there are pretty mature e-waste ecosystems that are out there. Again, people have a vision of, we're doing all this glorious recovery of small equipment, vacuum cleaners, microwaves, on, or larger equipment, maybe more home appliances, temperature exchange equipment, screens and monitors, all your mobile phones and pads and computers and lamps. And one thing I try to always emphasize to any forum that I'm presenting to is really there's a targeted process where the collectors and the processors, you're after these printed circuit boards. That's the primary target of this whole process, is getting to all the content, which is locked up in largely the printed circuit cards and these components, integrated circuits, and some memory devices that go on these boards. So there's a very selective hunt, if you will, to get this material parsed out, and then you can proceed with shredding it and processing it into your smelters. Just to quickly impress upon people, this is some data from 2021 that, my outlook was there's over 160,000 different groups globally that are involved in this e-scrap collection. It pares down when you process this and get more to the metals and plastics. Then you get after about 1,000 collectors and processors, which will pare it down and do the shredding. Then you get to about 100 concentrators and smelters, which will pare this down and this material into a concentrate. And at the end of the day, I think there's about 10 to 12 smelters globally that will generate about 2,000 tons of precious metals matte material, producing about 1,400 metric tons of precious metals that come out the end of the funnel. Yeah. And this 1,400 metric tons, that's the target. And when people grade these printed circuit cards, it's all about the gold content, right? There's assays and assessments and sampling that goes on that tells you how much gold is in there on a parts per million basis. And, a lot of these high printed circuit board categories are typically around 300 to 350 parts per million. The lows could be about 70 parts per million, with medium in between. And so just to give people a sense of how the e-waste system works. So Oliver, Hensel, now you've jumped into the e-waste segment. Why don't you describe a little bit about Hensel's operations? How's your business there developing, and how does your process compare to what I'm describing?
I think that the PGM prices go in cycles, and I think we just passed a new high cycle, and right. I think there was one around 2014, and PGM prices went down. And right. We said, as we only did mainly auto catalysts, we said we need to diversify, and we went into electronic scrap, focusing on precious metals. Because I think you have to understand that in the e-scrap business, you have two sides. One is the precious metal, the other one is more the environmental and the legislative side. So in Europe, right. We have the WEEE, the WEEE directive, which means waste electronic and electric equipment, so that has to be recycled. So when you right. buy a new TV, you can give back your old one to the dealership. It's collected, and then there's a lot of companies that really take the whole devices, run them through a shredder, separate the plastic, separate the metal frames like iron, aluminium, and then have a printed circuit board fraction. But it's all mixed together, and then you get a really low grade stuff of material. There's other right. people more that on the B2B side that go and collect computers, desktops, laptops, and then do maybe some manual work on it, take them apart, take the printed boards out, and then you end up with your high grade fraction. And they also have the plastic and so on. So we are really focusing at the moment with our capacities and volumes on the medium to high grade. Interesting thing is you put in their cell phones. The cell phones we get at the moment, it looks like you're sitting in a time machine, seeing all these old Nokias, Sony Ericsson, Siemens. Pretty easy to recycle because you can just take out the battery and then the other can go to the scrap fraction. With the Samsungs, the iPhones, where the battery is glued in, that's really tough to deal with. And I think that's the challenge for the future. If they become all end of life, we don't see much. I think most of the iPhones, even the iPhone 2, 3, they still somewhere in the world where they use them, or lying some at people's home in a hidden
Yeah, in my
treasure.
nightstand.
But really,
Yeah,
that will be a challenge. When they come with a battery built in that you can't remove.
right.
Yeah, but as I said, we focus on the precious metals and the copper content, and basically gold and copper. That's a value in printed boards. There's silver and aluminium, but that's more like a cream on top. You have
That's
it.
that's exactly right. And so, yeah, in terms of
Yeah,
the valuation of the metals that are recovered, yeah, half of it's gold. Some 14% is all the copper, and that number, the statistic will climb as copper prices keep climbing. There's palladium in there. There's plastics. There are select plastics that can get processed and do get processed. This is a very low margin business, by the way. Yeah, there's a
yeah.
little bit of silver in there. A lot of times there's silver in electronics. We know it's there. You could sample it, you could assay it, it's there, but it's just too low of a composition to be economically,
Yeah,
well
it's
targeted,
payable
if
in
you
the
will.
in the total mix. It's payable. You get the silver out. But as I said,
Right.
uh, $2,500 an ounce of gold versus $30 an ounce of silver, and even if it's the same percentage content in there, it's just a fraction.
Right.
The value.
Well, fantastic. So Oliver, as we wrap up here, so we got a sense of Hensel real quick. Obviously, you're dominant in the AutoCat worlds. You're staging to be well positioned for the hydrogen economy and the recovery there, and you've jumped into e-waste to help, if nothing else, to bring some business a little bit more equilibrium, if you will, while PGM prices can be volatile. So that's your strategy. By the way, on the e-waste, Oliver, I encourage you, see if you can get involved in data center decommissioning populations of server blades and population of boards that come out of data centers. That's
Yeah,
the most target rich environment you could find on the planet. And there's a lot of discussion about AI data centers and the like. The content's
Bitcoin
only going to
mining.
become. Yep.
Yeah.
Is there any other comments you want to add to this conversation before we wrap up here, Oliver?
I think we talked briefly about last time about photovoltaic, so PV
Yeah.
panels. So we looked in that, and we worked with some partners on ideas, but the silver content is getting lower and lower. So I think there are processes where you can remove the aluminium frames, the copper cables, and then delaminate the glass. And if you have just a silicon wafer with the silver on, and there is might be chance that it's valuable to recover the silver. There's also processes where they remove the silica, but yeah, so we look at that, but we are not active in the market. We do it more on a project base and check. But I think that's
Yeah.
going to be a huge amount of silver coming.
Oh, the silver's no doubt. And the fact that you can recover it and get close to spot price value for the silver that you recover is fantastic. The base metals, the aluminum, the tin, and the copper. Aluminum, you get like 40% of the aluminum spot price of the day, or tin, you'll get like 12% on your scrap rate value. Copper, you get 45%. Really, one of the biggest problems in the solar panel recycling is the glass panels that go on top of the modules.
Yeah.
They're $60 to $70 a piece. And yet, the way the scrap process works, it gets crushed up in what they call a clean glass cullet. But the problem with this is you only get like 1% of that $60 to $70 per panel in the value of this cullet. And what
Yeah.
ticks me off, Oliver, in this is that when you look at Europe and you look at the US, 25 or 26% of the glass feedstock that goes into new glass production is this clean glass cullet. Why are they giving you such a crummy scrap value for this is really one of the bigger problems. If you could get the value out of the glass higher, that would make the economic proposition much more attractive to go harvest the rest. But
Yeah.
there's just it's an economic balance problem. It's not that the technology doesn't exist to recover this. It's that the economics, you'll spend more money in doing the recycle than the value of the materials that you'll get from it. So
Yeah, and I
this is
think
what's holding up
that's the
solar.
same what's coming up with for example lithium iron phosphate batteries. Where there is no value in the material really
Right.
that pays for the recycling. There is technology to do that, but who pays for it?
Yeah.
That's the question.
Exactly. Well, great. Fascinating discussion, Oliver. I really appreciate your time. I hope the listeners appreciate the sustainability aspects of what goes on in these precious metals. And more you're going to see this even in valuable base metals. Obviously, copper recycle is such a big topic. But there's plenty of opportunities here that we can keep refining these processes, making more economically viable, and increase our rates of recycle. Obviously, that's good for everybody. Hey, Oliver, again, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Matt.
Not a problem. I hope our listeners will join us next week. We're going to get into gold and silver again with Mr. John Potts, who's the managing director from Fidelitrade. So looking forward to having a conversation with my friend next week on that. Again, this is Matt Watson with Green Rush, Mining the Energy Revolution. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you, everybody. Until next time, take care.
Green Rush, Mining the Energy Revolution with Matt Watson.